There's a certain kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. You probably know it well. The type where your body is still, lying down, maybe even perfectly rested, but your mind refuses to stop moving. It races in circles, like it signed up for a marathon you never even wanted to run. And while your legs stay still, your thoughts sprint endless laps. Strange, isn't it? On the outside, you're functioning fine. You wake up, you check off the tasks, you show up where you're expected, you smile when needed. But deep down, there's a different story running. You feel this quiet tug, this invisible rope tied to something heavy that you didn't ask to carry. And the strangest part? No one else can see it. If someone were to casually ask, "How are you?" you'd probably say, "I'm fine." Not because that's the truth, but because it's the safest response. Because sometimes you're not sure if people actually want to hear what's real, or if they just want the watered-down version of you that's easier to digest. What most people never pause to realize is that feeling stuck isn't always about what's happening around you. Often, it has nothing to do with external circumstances at all. More often, it's about the inner story, the outdated script running on repeat in your head about who you think you're supposed to be. We all carry around an invisible checklist, though most of us don't notice it until it's already weighing us down. You know the one: be successful, but not too much, because then you'll be intimidating. Be kind, but not so kind that people take advantage. Be calm, but care deeply about everything. Be honest, but not so honest that it makes other people uncomfortable. It's like trying to play a video game where the rules keep changing mid-level, yet somehow you're still expected to win. No wonder you're worn out. You're not just living, you're performing. And let's be clear, this performance doesn't mean you're being fake. It's far more subtle than that. It's survival. It's the adaptive mask you learn to wear in order to fit in, to keep the peace, to meet the endless expectations that were placed on you, even when those expectations quietly chipped away at your well-being. But here's the secret no one announces. Freedom doesn't appear when life suddenly becomes simple or when obstacles disappear. True freedom arrives the moment you stop performing for a life that doesn't belong to you anymore. That exhausted version of you that shows up out of obligation instead of joy, that's not freedom. That's just a beautifully decorated cage. And that's really what this message is about. We were never taught how to stop. Think about it. We weren't taught how to walk away from a job that drains the soul, how to leave a friendship that only takes and never gives, how to say no without following it up with a 10-sentence apology. Instead, we were trained to cling tightly, to hold on at all costs, to mistake endurance for virtue, to wear suffering like a badge of honor. Somewhere along the way, holding on, even when it hurts, became noble. Like if you can smile through pain, you're winning some invisible award for emotional toughness. But here's the plot twist. There is no prize. The only reward is chronic tension, anxiety that never fully rests, and the occasional existential crisis that shows up at 2 a.m. uninvited. And what you're holding on to, it's rarely one big thing. It's usually a pile of smaller weights, tiny unresolved moments you brushed aside with, "This doesn't matter." Except those tiny things always find their way back in. That conversation where you swallowed your truth instead of speaking it. That dream you buried under the phrase, "maybe someday." That inner critic who sounds suspiciously like your parents, whispering that no matter how much you've done, it's still not enough. You tell yourself you're fine. You keep pushing. Because some part of you has learned that letting go equals failure. But here's the truth. Letting go is not weakness. It's clarity. It's the courage to finally ask yourself, does this still belong in my life? Most of us never slow down long enough to ask that question. We just adapt. We shrink in rooms that don't see us. We silence our needs to avoid tension. We put on emotional masks until they feel like part of our skin. And the wild part? You might do all of this while appearing completely fine, put together, unshaken. People might even admire you for how calm you always seem. Meanwhile, inside, you're thinking, I just disassociated through half that conversation. But sure, let's repeat this tomorrow. That's the real trap. You can look composed while being completely disconnected. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't feel free when your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, constantly scanning the room to make sure peace is maintained. You can't feel light when you're dragging around 5 different versions of yourself just to make everyone else comfortable. That's the real reason you're exhausted. Not because you've done too little, but because you've done far too much of what no longer aligns with you. So, what happens when you stop? Stopping isn't giving up. It isn't passive. It's not laziness. Stopping is intentional. It's peeling back the autopilot you've been running on. It's the brave decision to notice that you've been trying to win a game you never even wanted to play. Some people spend their whole lives trapped in that loop, following a map that was never theirs, chasing milestones they don't actually care about, just to feel like they're doing it right. But you wouldn't even be here, reading or listening to this, if some part of you wasn't already ready to break free. You don't just want to be admired, you want to feel alive, to breathe without analyzing every inhale, to walk into a room as yourself without rehearsing it first. But here's the catch. When you stop doing what's fake for you, everything gets quiet. And that silence, it can feel terrifying, because it's the in-between space where your old beliefs go to die. You'll hear them echo, louder at first. You're lazy for resting. You're selfish for saying no. You're going to let people down, but those aren't truths. They're ghosts. Leftover echoes of a system you're finally walking away from. And if you keep going, you'll notice something. Freedom doesn't arrive like fireworks. It doesn't crash through your life with drum rolls and fanfare. It arrives softly, quietly. It's the moment your body finally unclenches. It's the moment you say no, without over-explaining. It's the realization that the world didn't collapse when you stopped holding it together by force. Real freedom is when you sit alone in a room and don't feel like you're failing. It's when your worth is no longer measured by how much you can endure, but by how deeply you can rest into your own peace. It's when you stop treating peace like a weekend luxury and start making it a non-negotiable. That's when everything shifts, not because the outside world suddenly transforms, but because you stop filtering your life through shame, guilt, and the heavy shoulds that were never really yours. You'll know you're getting closer to freedom when you stop apologizing for existing, when you wake up, not just from sleep, but from years of pretending. And here's the beautiful revelation. Once you stop performing, you realize you never actually had to perform in the first place. And it's funny, isn't it? Freedom hides in the least glamorous places. It's not in the perfect morning routine you saw on Instagram. It's not in the stack of self-help books collecting dust beside your bed. It's not hiding at the end of some mythical rainbow of achievement. Real freedom slips in quietly, disguised as relief. It's in the sigh you release when you admit, maybe I don't need to carry this anymore. At first, it's subtle. You notice you stop replaying old conversations, no longer inventing the perfect comeback to something no one else even remembers. You stop holding your breath, waiting for disaster, and you realize that most things don't collapse. And if they do, maybe you're strong enough to rebuild anyway. But to reach that space, you have to stop worshiping struggle. We've been conditioned to glorify exhaustion, to wear it like proof that our lives have meaning. We tell war stories about how much we've endured, as if the more bruised we are, the more worthy we become. But let's be clear, struggle doesn't equal purpose. It only equals struggle. And it's not your fault for believing otherwise. We live in a culture that idolizes busyness. Ask someone how they are, and 9 times out of 10, they'll proudly say, busy, as if constant busyness is an accomplishment. When was the last time you heard someone proudly say, peaceful? The truth is, many of us are secretly terrified of peace. We've built our identities around being stressed, overwhelmed, always carrying something heavy. Because if you're not struggling, who are you? If you're not constantly rushing or chasing the next milestone, then what do you measure yourself by? That's the uncomfortable silence most people avoid. Because when you strip away the stress, you're left with empty space. And to someone addicted to chaos, empty space feels like something's missing. But nothing's missing. That's just clarity. That's what peace sounds like. It's not emptiness. It's the sound of no longer fighting invisible battles. And ask yourself, isn't it exhausting to constantly bend yourself into shapes that make other people comfortable? To treat your life like a game of emotional Tetris, trying to fit neatly into expectations that were never really yours? Maybe it's time to stop, because freedom is quiet. It doesn't arrive with parades or applause. It comes in whispers, in relief, in subtraction. It's not about adding more to your life. It's about removing the pressure, the masks, the borrowed identities. Because once those layers fall, what rises isn't something you have to chase. It's what was always waiting for you beneath the weight. Here's the thing. Most of the heaviness you feel isn't even yours. It's inherited. Hand-me-down fears, recycled expectations, family patterns passed down without question, societal scripts you absorbed without consent, friends' insecurities disguised as advice. Comments like, "Are you sure you can handle that?" Or, "Don't you think you're aiming too high?" Each one adding a stone to your backpack until you're carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. No wonder you're tired. It's like hiking uphill with a pack full of rocks strangers tossed in without asking. Each one labeled with their doubts, their regrets, their better safe than sorry mindset. At some point, you've got to ask yourself, why am I still carrying these? You may think the weight keeps you safe, like armor. But armor doesn't only protect, it isolates. It keeps hurt out, yes, but it also keeps love and joy out too. Wear it long enough, and you forget how it feels to move freely, to breathe deeply, to trust. You weren't built to live braced for impact. You were built to feel, to risk, to connect. And yes, vulnerability feels terrifying at first. Who actually wants to feel exposed? But here's the paradox. That's where real freedom begins. The most peaceful people you've ever met aren't the ones who built the highest walls. They're the ones who slowly, brick by brick, let those walls come down. Freedom feels risky because it asks you to trust yourself without the safety net of other people's approval. But that's also where you meet your real self. Not the rehearsed version, not the filtered mask, but the raw, breathing human underneath. And maybe the hardest part about letting go is this: admitting you never really had control to begin with. Isn't that why you've been gripping so tightly? Most of us spend our whole lives building elaborate safety nets, plans, expectations, mental scripts, believing that if we just hold on tight enough, nothing can hurt us. But life isn't meant to be clenched. It's meant to flow. Try holding water in a fist. It only leaks faster. True strength isn't found in holding everything together. It's found in loosening the grip, letting life fall into its own rhythm, and trusting you'll still be okay. Yes, that kind of honesty is uncomfortable. It strips away all the masks, all the busy distractions you used to hide behind. It leaves you face to face with the you you've been avoiding, the one who feels uncertain, scared, vulnerable. But here's the twist. That version is exactly who you need to meet. Because the moment you stop pretending you have it all figured out, the world stops expecting you to. And that's where the magic begins. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because perfection was never the goal. The goal was never to be flawless. The goal was to be true. To be the kind of human who can feel joy without bracing for loss. To love without pre-planning the exit. To rest without feeling guilty. Freedom starts quietly, like the first deep breath after years of shallow ones. It's in the release that comes when you finally stop proving and start being. When you stop carrying weights that were never yours. When you stop chasing a vision of success that leaves you hollow. When you stop saying, "I'm fine," when you're anything but. Maybe the bravest choice you'll ever make isn't endless fighting. Maybe it's peace, clarity, authenticity, saying yes to what's real and no to what's not, even if it disappoints people, especially if it disappoints people. And let's be clear, this isn't passive. It's active courage. It takes courage to ask yourself, what do I actually want? Not what your family wanted, not what society told you to pursue, not what keeps everyone else comfortable, but what your soul, the quietest part of you, has been asking for all along. Because the moment you stop chasing what isn't yours, you make room for what is. That's when freedom arrives, not as something you forced into being, but as something you finally allowed. So if you're still here, if this message reached you, then let this be your sign. Leave a comment with the words "finally free." So I know you felt it. So I know you're ready. This isn't just another piece of content. It's an invitation to live lighter, to breathe deeper, to drop the performance and embrace the freedom that's been waiting quietly for you all along.